Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Miranda and this week is going to be my May reading wrap-up and a little bit about what you can expect to see me reading and talking about next month. So this month I read 10 books and 3 comic books or graphic novels, and I feel I did pretty well, especially considering that I had a bit of a mental health dip there in the middle of the month. 10 books overall is pretty good for me. Puts me at, I think, 49 books and comics read for the year. So not even halfway through the year, and I'm at 49 books. Originally, my goal for the year was 75, but I upped it to 100. Just to kind of give it a little bit of padding because I will be reading a lot of graphic novels here in a bit, or comic books. So the original goal is like 75 books and then the graphic novels on top of that. Yeah, anyways, let's get into it. Is Scythe by Neil Shusterman. I won't go into too many details about this series because I do plan on doing a deeper, longer book talk about it with Allison again, hopefully sometime this month if we have the time to get together. But essentially this follows 2 characters, 2 teenagers, Citra and Rowan, who are selected to train to be scythes in this world where essentially you don't die of natural causes. People are almost immortal in a way. The only way you can truly die is if you are essentially like burned and there's like nothing of your body left. But you can freeze, you can jump off buildings, you can do a whole bunch of things. And there's these facilities that will basically bring you back to life and repair your body. The society is controlled by this thing called the Thunderhead, which is essentially a sentient version of the Cloud that knows everything and runs the whole world. Now, first thinking about that, you're like, oh, that sounds maybe kind of bad. It's a utopia. Like, it really seems like it's a utopia. There's no crime. Everyone has a universal basic income. The only people in poverty are people who actually choose to live a poverty-like lifestyle. Like, no one's really starving. No one's dying of diseases. There's no real tensions or wars. Thunderhead has managed to help the climate and Earth get back on track. And like, honestly, I would live in this world. I would live in this world. I said it. It sounds great. One of the things that they mentioned though is that because people live so long and there is no real threat of death, people are kind of like bored a lot of the times, but like honestly, in my opinion, I would just take the time to read everything I've ever wanted to read and go visit places and do things. And working is a choice if you wanted more than the basic income, and the Thunderhead tries to help pair people with things that it knows would be in their best interest, that they would be happiest doing. So honestly, it sounds great. There are some issues within the Scythedom, however, and the Scythedom are those who are selected to essentially kill people for the purpose of keeping population control in check. So there are issues within the Scythedom of people wanting no limits on what they can do or how they can do it, and those who want to stick to the old ways of having a very respectable way of doing it, not enjoying what they do because they think that not enjoying the killing of people is the first step to being a truly honorable scythe, whereas the New Order scythes want to enjoy the act of killing. So this kind of revolves around these 2 apprentices that are brought into this Scythedom, and then this situation between this New Order and the Old Order and how they navigate that. So this, I believe I rated this book and all the other books 4 stars. Again, the one complaint, I think the only thing that really would have made this better for me is if the interpersonal relationships had been developed a bit more. I personally like when there's more motivation for characters to actually care for each other, and you see that more instead of just being told, oh, they care about each other. Like, I would like to see it more than just be told it. But yeah, again, I won't go into too many details about this because I'm going to be doing a larger book talk on it. But yeah, I gave Scythe 4 stars. I jumped straight into Thunderhead right after that, which is the second book of the month. I also gave this 4 stars, and this follows Citra and Rowan as they go from apprentices into Scythe and the issues from there. The conflict between the New Order and the Old Order is tensing up. And oh my god, the ending of this book had me shook. Like, it really... I was shocked. I was sitting there like, what the hell just happened? In a good way. It was great. And I really like that there's more of a focus on Citra, or Scythe Anastasia. I really liked her as a character. I really liked her development. But again, yeah, won't go into this too much again. 4 stars for Thunderhead. Despite wanting to binge read completely The Toll, I did take a little bit of a break and read Fauna by Christiane Vadnais. This is a book translated into English, I believe from French. And it is supposed to be about the near future where climate change is happening and weird things are happening to nature and humans. I picked this up thinking it had a lot of potential. It's a little novella, not very long, and it's supposed to be all these little vignettes, essentially, of stories and people that connect together. And maybe I'm just not deep enough, but it really didn't do it for me. The first chapter has a pretty explicit sexual assault scene that has nothing to do with the plot. The second chapter again focuses mostly on sex, which again doesn't really have anything to do with the plot. There's like little hints at things in there in the first 2 of things not being quite right, but overall it didn't exactly deliver what I hoped it would. Yeah, the first 2 scenes being focused on sex and sexual assault. After that, it just got kind of confusing. Nothing actually really seemed to piece together too well. There was like maybe 2 of them that connected. And there just wasn't as much going on with the environment and the world as I wanted. Like, I wanted more development of that. I wanted more details about that. And it just wasn't there. It was interesting that people became like bird-like creatures by the end of it because of everything going on. But I also found that kind of unrealistic because it seemed to take place over like a generation. And I truly don't believe a genetic change like that would happen that quickly. Though it did kind of take the form of a plague where people got sick and they got these boils, and then some people lived through it. And if they did, those boils would like erupt into feathers or something. But yeah, overall, it was just really confusing. At this point, I don't remember too much about it other than I was really disappointed and I don't understand what the sexual assault had to do with the beginning of it. Yeah, and I had hoped for more from this one, but the writing was really pretty. So I think that's what gave it like a 2.5 and not like a 1 for me, is that the writing was pretty and the writing was well done. It just, there wasn't as much to kind of make the point as I hoped there would. It was definitely more focused on the atmosphere instead of the actual world or the characters or the things going on. So yeah, Fauna was 2.5 stars for me. Next up is The Toll. So this follows Scythe Anastasia, Rowan, and a couple other characters that are introduced along the way as they try to find a way to stop the New Order from their basic corruption of the Scythedom. I gave this a 4 stars. I will say a couple of the things that I want to say, but again, more detail will become when I do that longer video, and I don't want to give too many spoilers, but I believe the ending was kind of a cop-out. I wished for more of a justice to be delivered, especially to Scythe Goddard and the New Order Scythe. Like, I really wish that there was more that was done to them. Like, they actually had punishments dealt to them instead of the ending. And essentially just leaving the planet at this point, it just kind of seemed like a cheap ending when there could have been a really cool, interesting resolution to the issues. Though I understand why the space exploration happened, and it was to help control the population so that when people passed, they could be sent to another, like put in basically cryostasis, frozen, sent to another planet and reawoken there and live a new life somewhere else where they have more room and more resources to grow. So I understand, but I was also a little bit disappointed. It was still a 4 stars because of everything that happened in the book. Very, very quick paced in this one. There's just a lot that happens, like one after the other after the other. But yeah, the ending was like a little bit of a miss for me. It was a miss for me. After that, I read A Thousand Ship by Natalie Haynes. This follows the woman of the Trojan War and the after effects of the Trojan War on the woman and the effects that the woman had on the Trojan War. So it follows like Helen, Cassiopeia, Cassandra, all these people. I feel like I would have enjoyed this if I had more knowledge of that particular history and myths and such, but it was a very woman-centric view of this event and this history, and legends and mythology and stuff like that, and I really enjoyed that. I would say there's not too terribly much of an actual plot to be had, because it's just going over these aspects that happened in the Trojan War with all these gods and the fates and things like that, and showing the woman's point of view and how they either influenced the war or were influenced by it. So I won't have too much to comment on this, because again, I'm not too familiar with that whole thing. But I thought the writing was beautiful. I didn't expect to be as drawn in by this, but I started the first chapter and the writing style was just really, really well done, and it just had my attention. Even if the story itself necessarily didn't grip me until a little bit later. But yeah, it follows a whole bunch of different women. It has a whole bunch of different stories. It focuses sometimes on like the gods, so like Artemis and Athena and stuff, they're drawn in as well. And I just thought it was really interesting to actually see the gods portrayed in a way where you can see that they're very flawed, and to see the actual consequences of women when it comes to something like war. So there are, one of the muses has chapters interspersed where she's talking to a poet who is both upset and emotionally touched by the story she's telling him, which is this story, the story of the woman. And she's trying to make him realize that men aren't the only one who suffer in a war. There's women who suffer, and what happens when a city falls and all of these women are taken as slaves, like what happens to them, what goes through their heads, or how can they influence a war, because Helen had a lot of influence on the war, is it pretty much. So yeah, I think I gave this 4.5 stars. The writing style is great, and this was an ARC copy that I got from my local indie bookstore to help them vet what they wanted to bring in. And I'm very appreciative for that, because I did really, really enjoy this. After that, I took a break to read some nonfiction, and I read Usual Cruelty, The Compliance of Lawyers in the Criminal Justice System, or Criminal Injustice System. And this is by a lawyer by the name of Alec Karakatsanis. So they are a lawyer, and these are 3 essays that they wrote throughout their career. The first one is the most recent one, second one was midway through their career, and the third one, I think, was as a law student. And this, I feel like this is more aimed at lawyers to read than a general target audience of like you and me. But the first essay was actually about a lot of the injustices of the justice system, like children in chains and the harm that putting people in prisons can do, and the cases that just didn't make sense. Like, oh gosh, what was his name? There was a lot of names mentioned. But the man who won an appeal to be freed from prison, and then Obama basically was like, no, you can't do that, and put him back even though he was innocent and should have been out of jail. Like, all these different types of injustices are brought up in this first essay, which I found to be the most impactful as just a normal reader. The other 2 were more, again, pointed towards lawyers and encouraging lawyers to be what he calls a human lawyer, who looks at things with more compassion, who looks at the reasoning behind certain punishments and brings up the point that we have to have proof beyond a reasonable doubt that a crime was committed, but we don't really give a second thought to what the punishment is and if that punishment actually has any benefit to either the criminal, the victim, or society. And oftentimes it doesn't, because putting people in cages often just puts them in a worse place than they were before when they committed the crime. Now, of course, that's not to say that there aren't some people who should be taken off the streets, like mass murderers and such like that. But he makes a good point that a lot of these prisons are just more violent places where people go in and have to do even worse things to survive them. And they come out with no resources. They come out like with all these social ties cut and are just worse off. And there's no actual evidence that jailing people helps either the people themselves or the victims or society as a whole. And he does talk about how this proportionally targets people of color, specifically Black people, and that's a big focus on his essays. How there was this courtroom of minors being tried, I think in DC, and it was like the secret courtroom in like the basement, and like every single person he saw there was maybe one white kid in his like many months of being there, and everyone else was Black kids for like minor like things that you would think maybe like a rehab facility or a lighter sentence or community service or something like that would serve them better, but essentially it's just putting them to be fodder for the jail system. So it was really hard to read, especially the first essay, but it was a really important read. And again, the first essay is where I would suggest if you're going to pick this up, just read the first one, because the second two, while they do have some information, again, it's more pointed at lawyers. And if you're not a lawyer, I feel like you're not going to get as much from the second essays as you do from the first. And it's incredibly short as well. A good third of the book is all of his notes and references. He's a very, very well-referenced person. Which is nice to have those references that I can go look at and learn more. The only thing I will say too is if you go into reading this is the writing style is a bit weird. He makes very deliberate word choices to not say things like jails or prisons or breaking in and reassuring things. And I understand why he does it. And that's to like destigmatize these situations. But at the same time, the replacement words that he uses are often very, it's very wordy. So you have this big like run-on sentence of all these words, so it can get a little bit confusing because you're like halfway through a sentence, you're like, wait, what? Like, personally, I found that to be a little bit off-putting, but I understand exactly why he did it. So it was a very good choice for a mindset-wise, but it can get a little bit clunky when you're reading it. I don't think I gave this an actual rating. If I did, it'd be 5 stars for the content. Because yeah, how do you rate a nonfiction book like this? Because the content in 5 stars, but the writing is a little bit less than that. But overall, I would definitely recommend the first essay in this. You might even be able to find it online because again, this is just a collection. The first essay is The Punishment Bureaucracy. That would be the one I would recommend reading because I believe for people who are not lawyers or involved in the criminal justice system, we would get the most understanding out of that one. After that, I decided to step a little bit out of my comfort zone and read like a murder mystery thriller type thing, Mr. Flood's Last Resort by Jess Kidd. I got sent this in one of my Piece and Pages boxes, so I figured, why not? I do have some time to read at work sometimes, so I like to have something that I don't mind being pulled away from if a customer comes in. So I took this one with me to work and started reading it from there. I gave this a 2.5 stars. This follows Maud, a care worker who is sent to Mr. Flood, Mr. Cannell Flood. He is this old, belligerent old man who lives in this mansion that is just full of crap. Like essentially it's a hoarder's paradise. And he's scared off many, many different care workers. But essentially he's told if he scares off one more care worker, he's going to be sent to a home. So he needs to not have any more incidents. Well, there are a lot of incidents. So Maud starts working for him and cleaning up the home. They kind of get into it verbally a few times because he's upset that she's actually cleaning. He doesn't like really having anyone around him. And then while she's cleaning, there's like these little events that happen that give her like a toilet pops up and this milk bottle with a picture in it comes in and someone's face is burnt off in it. So she brings it up to her neighbor, Mrs. Renata, who is a trans woman. I do have some stuff to say about that. Brings up these two pictures that she finds with people's faces burns out, and how one of them's probably his wife, and how the wife died because she fell down the stairs. And Renata makes this whole big thing about, oh my gosh, this is a murder mystery case. And I just kind of saw that as like a really big leap. And maybe part of it is because Renata is very, very reclusive, very agoraphobic, and she watches a bunch of crime shows, so maybe just her mind went crazy. So she starts getting Maud to be paranoid. Maud starts investigating around the house. She meets this person named Sam Hebben, who was supposed to be the caretaker before her, and they start like investigating all this together, her, Sam, and Renata, and it was just fucking confusing. Because interspersed through all of this are little chapters and flashbacks to Maud's childhood where her sister goes missing. And Maud also sees saints, and that's never really, like, explained. Like, she sees saints, and they kind of give her a little bit of feedback. And then the saints are also saying, hey, those things you remember about your sister, that's not how they really happened. You're not remembering it correctly. So Maud's made out to be this very, very unreliable narrator. You never know what's actually going on. And it just didn't work for me. Especially because later you find out Sam isn't actually Sam. And she, like, sleeps with him before she finds this out. And then, like, he dips the next day. Like, I think she wakes up and, like, goes to make coffee or something. And he fucking dips. And she, like, he left his wallet or something. And, like, she can tell, she thinks he's cheating on his wife because, like, he doesn't really have, like, identification or anything in his wallet. Like, she snoops. And then for some reason, like, even knowing that, like, he hit it and quit it and then dipped when he came back, she, like, took him back, and, like, they keep sleeping together and keep having this relationship, even though she thinks she can't trust him. And there's just so many things that happen that don't make sense. Like, girl, why would you keep sleeping with a guy you don't think you can trust? Is the dick really that good? Like, why would you, at first you think he's cheating on you, and then you think he's not who he says he is, so why would you keep sleeping with him? And then it turns out that he tries to fucking murder her, and that he's really the one who is, okay, so essentially the whole story is, Mr. Flood and his wife had 2 kids. I believe Gabriel. Sam Hebben is really Gabriel. The person who claims to be Gabriel is not Gabriel. It's a whole fucking mess. But Gabriel and the daughter Marguerite, well, they go on vacation, and they come back from vacation, and Marguerite's gone. So essentially Marguerite supposedly, apparently tried to kill Gabriel, and Mary Flood, the wife, was, like, more in love with Gabriel than she was Marguerite, and Marguerite was supposedly insane, so they sent her to this home when they went on vacation, and they came back and they claimed she died, but she didn't die. And then at the home that she was at, she kept trying to escape, and eventually one time she escaped and made it all the way back to their house. And then her and Gabriel got into a fight, and then Gabriel, like, pushed her down a well or some shit and killed her, and then just covered it up. It was crazy. And the whole saints thing in there, again, doesn't make sense. The part with Maud's sister going missing doesn't make sense. And again, why would you keep sleeping with someone who you know is lying to you, girl? I know, like, she needed to keep him around for the plot of him trying to kill her in the end and, like, having his whole confession. But, like, why would any sane woman try, like, keep sleeping with someone who she knows is potentially dangerous and lying about who they are? Can someone explain that to me in the comments below? Because I don't get it. I don't get it. So yeah, 2.5 stars because I did read the whole fucking thing. And I found it interesting to a point. Like, I wanted to know more about the saints. Why were they there? That was never explained. What about her sister? Never really explained. But yeah, and I just feel kind of bad giving anything lower than 2.5 stars, but whatever. That was this one. Don't really recommend. After that, I read All the Ever Afters, The Untold Stories of Cinderella's Stepmother by Danielle Teller. This was another 2.5 star read for me. So this was again sent to me in my Piece and Pages boxes, and I picked it up as a book to start at work. I read the whole thing because I really liked the writing style, and it kind of reminded me of those books I used to read, like the American history or like world history, like diaries that were like supposed to be from like these girls and like historical events, and there were these diaries. That's what it reminded me of, and I was a hoe for those in like 8th grade. So kind of the nostalgia factor from that is what kept me reading this. Um, I will say trigger warnings in advance for, let's see, let me see if I can remember everything. Um, Suicide, sexual assault, abusive relationships, multiple death mentions. God, I feel like I'm forgetting something. No, that might be all of it, but yeah. Essentially, this is a historical fiction where they take the story of Cinderella and she puts it in a historical setting and takes Agnes, Cinderella's stepmother, and makes her a sympathetic character. So this is Agnes's story from when she was a young girl up until her pretty much adoption of Cinderella, whose real name is Elfida, but they call her Cinder. We'll get there. So essentially, Agnes starts off as a laundry girl in this guy's house, this lord's house, and because she had to be sent away from her family because her family couldn't afford to have a dowry for her and it couldn't afford to feed her, so she was sent somewhere that essentially she'd be a live-in maid but be cared for. She's there for several years and kind of receives kind of crappy treatment. The only one who really treats her nicely is the lord of the house, who kind of takes a favor to her because she's the only one who doesn't treat him like crap because he's kind of an idiot and a drunk and he doesn't know what he's doing. Eventually she gets a chance to go somewhere else to another property owned by the same woman and family that owns this house that the lord is taking care of. And she becomes a maid for this older woman. From there, she is taught how to read. She learns religion. Well, she's already religious, but she gets to have more religion. And then she strikes up a relationship with this man who is quite a bit older than her, I believe. And he rapes her at first, and then she convinces herself that it's love, and then they keep sleeping together, and then she gets pregnant, and then she gets sent away from the abbey. And he doesn't really like her anymore after he gets her pregnant, which is fucked up. So she's pretty much on her own. He'll come by every so often, and after she has her first kid, was it Charlotte? She decides to take over the local brewery, and she becomes an alewife and makes this brewery super popular, and she's super cool. And the only people that doesn't like her is this one kind of racist lady because her kids are dark skinned, and one of them like has pox marks or something, so she's like disfigured. But like she's super cool and she's super sympathetic and like girl boss. And like they kept referring to Agnes as Cinder Girl, and I'm like, if this was a historical fiction on its own, I would have given it probably more because it was interesting. But for trying to be Cinderella's stepmother and using bits of Cinderella's story, like the Cinder Girl part, and assigning it to the stepmother, I just felt was kind of lazy. And also, like, just let villains be villains. Like, the only one that I've liked so far has been Maleficent because she did, you know, kind of have, like, a morally gray area. Like, but just let villains be villains. Let Agnes be, like, a bad person. They also made Cinderella to be this really, really naive, bratty, like, absolutely, like, awful child, honestly. And then somehow I'm supposed to believe that, like, they love each other. Like, because Cinderella, once she goes with the prince, like, she requests that her stepmother and stepsisters are brought to the palace with her. And, like, they love each other. And, oh my gosh, like, everything's good after that. And I'm like, but y'all, like, fucking hated each other, like, 2 pages ago. Let's be real. So yeah, overall, again, just confusing. If you like historical fiction, I would say maybe go for it. I didn't care for it. Keep in mind those trigger warnings, though. So yeah, 2.5 stars for this one. After that, I finally got around to Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. This is a King Arthur retelling in a YA setting following a black girl named Bree as she goes to something called early college, where essentially she's 16 and she gets into a college program where she's attending college a bit earlier. Her and her friend Alice, who is an Asian girl, attend and apply to get out of their tiny town where they're probably some of the only people of color there, so they're trying to get out and broaden their horizons. But as soon as she gets to Carolina University, where gotta remember where I was before my battery died. So it follows Bree. As soon as she gets to the Carolina campus, weird things starts happening, and she starts to realize that she's seeing magical things. And to figure this out, she gets involved with this Order of the Round Table and learns that the King Arthur legend is true, magic exists, and these people in the order are essentially the descendants of the 13 Knights of the Round Table, and they can be called upon by the knights to fight off these demons that are essentially haunting the area. And there's chapters like all throughout the world. It also combines like root magic and magic of African American people and ancestry and heritage involved, and it kind of ties it all together very nicely and very beautifully. I really liked the story. I liked Bree's exploration of herself, both with the root magic and the work that she does in the Order of the Round Table, where she believes her mother dies at the beginning of the book. I should have started with that. And she, after going to Carolina, she starts to believe that her mother was killed by either someone in the Round Table or a rogue person, rogue Merlin from the Order. So she essentially gets involved to try to solve the mystery of what happened to her mother. So just the whole tie between ancestry and magic and roots and all of that I thought was very, very well done. The only thing, again, I didn't like in this was the romance, but that is a very, very common complaint that I have in YA books, because her and the love interest, like 3 days into knowing each other, they're already making out and hot and heavy and like can't live without each other. And I'm just like, that's okay. Like, there might be a reason for them to have a connection, but again, I still just say I don't believe it. Like, that's just something I always find annoying, and like pretty much no matter what YA book we're reading, not necessarily this. They are cute though, and Nick is a gentleman, so I'll give him a pass. But other than that, there's a lot of stuff that goes on. I don't want to say too much about it, because I don't want to give too many spoilers, and I just feel like it's something that you want to go into not knowing as much, so that you can just be kind of swept away from the story. But I did give it a 4 stars. I was kind of in the middle of an emotional slump, so I just didn't connect to the characters as much as I could have, had maybe I been in a better mindset. But this is a series. I'm very excited to see where it goes after this. I believe, was this a debut? I don't know if it was a debut or not, but Tracy Deonn's writing style is really nice, very easy flow. There were some things where I found confusing, like it felt like a little jumpy between pieces, but everything does kind of make sense in the end. And I think just having the retribution of Bree's heritage come about at the end was just like poetic justice, honestly. And it was really interesting to, especially as a white woman, to read about Bree's experience, about all these little microaggressions she dealt with from the Order of the Round Table and other people throughout campus, because that's not something that I would ever personally experience, again, as a white woman. So it was interesting to read that and get a bit more of that perspective and a bit more of that understanding, and then see how that also influences Bree as a very courageous, very driven young woman who is setting out to do what she knows is right, and what she needs to in order to find peace for herself, and to come to terms with what happened to her mother. So overall, yeah, I just think this was really, really good. I really liked it, and I'm waiting for the second one to come out. Don't know when that is, but hopefully soon. The next things that I read was Paper Girls Volume 1, Volume 2, and Volume 3. I believe there's 6 total volumes in this, and I'm not going to go into too much detail because I haven't finished the whole series, and I feel like I would probably need to finish the whole series to really give a good review on this. But essentially it is a kind of science fiction, fantasy-esque graphic novel from the same people who wrote Saga. And it is about these young 12-year-olds on a paper route who, the day after Halloween, start experiencing some weird shit and kind of live through what is essentially Armageddon. There's space travel involved, time travel, and they have to kind of navigate this and get back to their timeline without messing things up, without dying. My only complaint about this is you can tell it's written by men about young women, because there's a very odd part, I think, in the third one where one of the characters is very, very obsessed with the other one starting her period, and I just feel like had that been written by women, it would have come across differently, but since it was written by men about prepubescent girls, it just came across kind of weird. But other than that, yeah, I'm really interested to see where it goes. There's 3 more. I have them on hold at my library, so as soon as I get them, I'm going to binge read the rest. But I do like that it goes through several different timelines, both future and past. Although I am interested to see if it brings up more of how this is happening, because right now there's not much how, there's just what's happening. So I think I've rated these like 4.5 stars consistently all the way through. And yeah, hopefully soon I'll be able to finish it as soon as those holds come in from my library. The last book of the month is How Rory Thorne Destroyed the Multiverse by Kay Eason. This is sort of a fairy tale retelling, but also kind of like a what happens after. It takes the Sleeping Beauty fairy tale and describes the situation of what happened with Sleeping Beauty and how that influenced this Thorne dynasty. And that dynasty eventually moves to another planet after using up the resources on theirs. And eventually Rory Thorne, so every generation the first child born is named Rory, but usually it's always boys that are born. But this time it was a girl that was born and named Rory. So there's a naming ceremony for her that is kind of like Aurora's in the original Sleeping Beauty, where the fairies come, but this time the 13th fairy is invited, so they don't have that slight. And the fairies, while they're there at the naming ceremony, pretty much reveal that the whole reason boys have been born every single time was to kind of prevent another thing like Aurora's story. And they basically made it to where there would pretty much always be boys born, and the only reason Rory was born a girl is because Rory's mother wished it so much that it kind of overrode the fairies' blessing or curse, however you want to see it. So essentially Rory's born, she survives. Her father is assassinated along with a dignitary from another planet. And from there, she grows up and has to face the injustices of being a girl in a world that is very, very much still dominated by men. She's essentially denied the inheritance of the throne, even though her mom is ruling at the moment since the king is dead. And it goes to her younger brother, who she believes is incompetent. She's used as a pawn in a political marriage, and essentially she's sent to this space station where the regent who is ruling for the other dignitary who was killed in the assassination attempt is trying to usurp the throne from the child who also survived with Rory and who Rory is supposed to marry. So it goes into this whole thing of Rory trying to find a way out of it, trying to figure out this conspiracy on whether or not Ivar, the prince, is still alive. And it's really interesting. I liked the technology in this. I liked the world they built, and I really liked, they call it arithmancy, so essentially it's math, but like it does things that's like coding, but it's kind of magical in a way. I thought it was really interesting. I liked Rory's character, although the only thing that I don't understand is one of the fairies said, oh, she's kind, and so everyone's like, oh, she's kind, oh, she's kind, but she doesn't really act like it all the time. Like, people think she's kind, but the things that she's doing are very much that of a princess trying to navigate a political world. There's times where she's ruthless, there's times where she's scheming, and so I don't really get the kind aspect. That could have been played on more, I think, or just taken out completely, because I don't really think I would necessarily, from what I've gotten of Rory, I wouldn't necessarily use kind as one of her defining traits. I would use intelligent, I would use mischievous, I would use stubborn, things like that. But I like the writing style as well. It's written as like a historian's account. So there's like a little bit of almost like in retrospect commentary on it. I am currently reading the second book, which is How the Multiverse Got Its Revenge, which takes place after Rory goes through all these events and basically stops a marriage she doesn't want. But yeah, anyways, that is my reading wrap up for the month. Like I said, I am reading the sequel to How Rory Thorne Destroyed the Multiverse. I have started The Vor by Caitlin. I've started The Priory of the Orange Tree. I have several other things on hold for my library because I do need to stop buying books and save up to pay off all the debt to fix my teeth, which is so fun. I love being in debt. But anyways, thank you so much for watching if you've made it with me this far. Next week is going to be hopefully a little bit of a Pride themed sewing project, since it is Pride Month now. And obviously I'm part of the Alphabet Mafia as an ace woman. And it just seems fun. I'm excited to do a sewing project again and get one up. And after that, hopefully I will be able to do my Arc of the Scythe trilogy book talk with Allison and maybe a mid-year wrap-up at the end of this month. So stick around if you want to. Go ahead, subscribe, comment, like, do all that good YouTube stuff. Let's be friends. Let's have a discussion about these books in the comments. Yeah, tell me what you liked, what you didn't like, recommendations, anything like that. I'm down. I'll leave my socials in the comments if you want to be friends. And yeah, let's hang out, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.